Hello and welcome to the Chop Shop. My name is Dion Tucker. In this episode of the Black Trombone Chronicles, I'm going to speak with Jeffery Miller. Jeffrey's an extremely talented trombonist from New Orleans, Louisiana. Let's check out some of his stories and experiences.
Yo.
Jeff, what's up, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How you feeling?
Blessed to, live another day and,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, man. I appreciate you, man, coming on this episode of the Black Trombone Chronicles. For those of you out there that don't know Jeffery Miller, he's an extremely talented trombonist out of one of my favorite cities here, New Orleans, Louisiana. Hey. And he's going to talk to us a little bit today about his experience and share some stories with us of being a Black trombonist in today's music scene. So, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on.
Oh, bro, anytime.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, man, start by telling the people a little bit how old you were when you started playing and what got you into playing the trombone.
So, I started playing trombone around 10 or 11, and I'm 24 now. So it's been a minute. And I started playing in middle school. It was sort of like you had to audition for the instrument you wanted to play, and I had originally auditioned for drum set because I taught myself drums by ear, and I thought I was better than I actually was. And so when it came time to audition, I had to name the different parts of the drum set and everything. And like I said, I taught myself by ear, so I didn't really know anything technical about the drums at all. I didn't know the difference between a bass drum and a hi-hat or anything. Like I didn't know anything. So needless to say, I didn't get the slot. There were two kids who grew up playing in church, so they were much more experienced than me. So I was put on snare drum originally, and then I didn't really apply myself, I guess, because I was still salty about not getting put on drum set. So a teacher ran up to me, Keith Hart. He's a black music teacher who's from New Orleans, went to University of New Orleans, and he's really, really great dude. And he ran up to me one day and was like, "Hey, do you want to play trombone?" Because he was also a trombone player. And I was like, I guess I'll just ask my grandmother, like what she thinks, because I was living with my grandma at the time. And she was like, "I don't care as long as you don't make too much noise. It's cool." And so I, that's sort of how it started. And then I guess it was a natural fit. And then things just started to go from there.
Yeah, yeah. Did you do you feel that teacher that you mentioned, do you feel like he was a direct influence on you becoming a musician, kind of like looking back on it, or was he an influence on you just as a person, when you were coming up?
Definitely both. I feel like first it was definitely music based, just because he saw a little bit of himself in me as a young trombone player, because I advanced kind of quickly on the instrument, just I guess because it was new, and I guess there was some kind of natural thing where I don't know, something about the trombone. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it, but I sort of picked up on things quicker, and then he started taking me under his wing with private lessons and everything. That was my first experience of private music lessons too with him. I would just stay after school one day and we would just practice scales and etudes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it definitely started as that, and then it sort of blossomed into a mentor relationship. And it was a beautiful thing. It was cool.
Yeah. Do you feel like growing up in New Orleans, I just look at that as that's a trombone city, that's a place where like people know what a trombone is. You don't have to be like, it's the thing with the slot. You don't have to do that in New Orleans.
Exactly. Definitely.
Do you feel like just being in that environment kind of inspired you to want to be a trombonist? Because I know a lot of times it depends on where you grow up. Like growing up in Miami, a lot of the representation I saw of the trombone was in salsa bands or in marching bands and stuff, but I didn't do marching bands. So like the first bands I was in was salsa bands, you know, and groups like that. But hearing the sound of that, you know, definitely hearing it on the radio definitely influenced me as a trombone player. Did the environment that you were in and hearing the trombone influence you to want to pursue it more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had cats like, you had cats like Corey Henry and Delphio Marsalis and you had Trombone Shorty just around the corner. You know, you had cats on the horn who are really, you know, saying something with it and making a name for themselves on the instrument, right? So it was definitely less of a no-brainer, or I guess more of a no-brainer to just stay with it, especially because those cats were very receptive to me early on. Just as I started playing around the city more and just, you know, talking to people, getting connected with people. So it was easier when I got that support from them. Like, I guess kind of like a cosign just to, you know, like, keep going, you know, you're doing your thing, blah, 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 you know, things like that. So that definitely helped sort of lock it in. So, okay, let me just continue with this instead of just, you know, abandoning ship and just going into like, I don't know, like a math career or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what other kind of things were you interested in when you were growing up? Like, did you have any other thing that you thought, oh, maybe I'll do this and not do music?
Yeah, I in middle school, I thought I wanted to be a math professor growing up, because the middle school that I went to, it was a KIPP school. It's a knowledge is power program school, and it was the first. I was part of me and my sister and I were part of the first, like the inaugural class of the whole school. So it was sort of like a new experience for everybody involved, and so we spent the summer. We would have to go to these things called summer schools. It wasn't like a remedial kind of thing. It was more just like get everybody used to the school environment and everything. It was a very specific school environment. So we would have these things called these summer schools. And the very first summer school of the school's history was on campus at Tulane. So we would have classes in Tulane classrooms, and we'd have math classes in like a Tulane, you know, college classroom. And I guess that sort of, and math, I guess, was easier at the time back then. I mean, it's still, I like math. I gravitate towards math. But back then I was just so in love with it. And I was like, okay, I'm in this college classroom. I could see myself teaching math in college or whatever. And then I also drew cartoons growing up. So I also was like, I guess if teaching math doesn't work out, I can be a cartoonist or an animator or something like that.
Yeah.
And draw for like Nickelodeon or Disney Channel. I don't know, one of those.
Yeah.
So those are like kid dreams, and then grew up. I still draw to this day just as a stress reliever. Not so much the math thing, but
yeah. I tried to get back into drawing. It wasn't that long ago. I got this book called The Right Side of the Brain or something that. And it's like really good for teaching people how to draw. And it takes you through like all the different steps. And it kind of lets you realize that you leave off with drawing like wherever you left off, whatever age you stop drawing at, that's kind of how you draw. So I'd still draw like a fifth grader, like for sure. There's probably fifth graders out there that have way better art. I know there are that have way, but it was really interesting because I do photography as well. That's something I kind of got into about 6 or 7 years ago. And perspective, you know, is a big thing in whatever we do, music, but it's really big when you're drawing, you know. And one of the exercises was to turn the picture upside down and draw it upside down.
Whoa.
You know, and see how that and it was interesting because your brain is now just looking at these shit instead of saying, okay, there's a chin, let me draw the chin. It's just a shape, you know. So it kind of really started opening up perspective wise, you know, how I was looking at things. And definitely musically too, you know, I started looking at things from different perspectives. I was gonna ask you, you know, being a intrigued by math, is that something that kind of carries into your approach to music now? Because a lot of jazz playing can be related to math, you know, and we can use a lot of the same techniques.
Right. I maybe subconsciously, but I don't really think too mathematically about music. Maybe whenever I think about theory, there's some kind of math. I mean, obviously, but there's some kind of math based thought process there. But whenever I'm in the moment playing and everything, I don't really think too mathematically about things.
Yeah, I definitely find it helps in like situations where, say, if you have to play a song in another key or something like that, you can just play it by ear, or you can say, okay, what's the 2 chord of this? What's the 5 chord of that? You know, so I find that math helps me in those senses, and reading also, reading rhythms. If you can break something down, you know, to like, bless it, it definitely is. My music teacher in high school was big, like mathematical. We had to like count everything, but it helped, you know, it really did help in the long run. Yeah. So when you were, when it was time, you know, you graduating high school and it's time to like go to college, you wound up picking Julliard. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was between Berkeley and Julliard.
Okay.
I got a scholarship to Berkeley first because I did the Tipitina's internship with Donald Harrison in New Orleans, my senior year of high school, I believe. And then it's part of the city music program. And so we were able to audition and, you know, get a full ride if they felt it proper. So that was, I honestly thought I was just going to wind up at Berkeley and just do the whole thing, because a lot of New Orleans guys just go to Berkeley and do that whole thing. And then I got a scholarship to, I actually can't remember which happened first, but there are two parts to the story, I guess, of how I wound up at Julliard. I got an ASCAP award, the Louis Prima Award from ASCAP. They awarded to either musical theater person or jazz musician at my arts high school, the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, every year. And I got selected that year from the Louis Prima Foundation to receive the award. And so they fly me and my teacher up to New York to receive the award at Lincoln Center, actually. And so I was in town for that. And my high school sort of set up a tour of Julliard, just like a tour of the building and everything. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go, you know, check it out. And then I honestly fell in love with the building and like the architecture, like inside. And I was like, whenever I'm in new situations, I like to, or whenever I like to potentially envision myself in these situations whenever I'm in these kind of things. So I kind of saw myself there, just like walking the halls, like as a student and everything. And so that kind of, I guess, planted the seed of, okay, I'll consider applying, because it's something about, I don't know, about the school that I was like, okay, it kind of gravitated me towards it. So I was like, okay. And then I was home in New Orleans, and we were playing, the Jazz Lincoln Center cats are actually in New Orleans for the Abyssinian Mass performance. And Winton was also in town, and there was like this jam session that doubled as a sort of welcome home for Winton and the cats, and also his father's birthday, Alice Marcellus' birthday, rest in peace. And so there was a jam session. I was there playing a blues, and Winton heard me, and he was, you know, it wasn't the first time he heard me, but it was the first time in a while. and I was playing, and he was like, after the song, we were talking, and he was like, "You should think about coming to New York," you know. And he didn't necessarily say Julliard, but I think he might have mentioned it. It's like, you know, Julliard, maybe, for example. And this is before I had known that he was going to take over the program. Mm-hmm. And so when it came time, I was like, you know what? It was very last minute, though, that I actually decided to apply. So I was like, you know, let me just do it. And sent the pre-screening in. And then the, you know, got the live audition, and then sort of happened that way.
Yeah. That's it's funny. My my former roommate, Kevin Lewis, who's also a New Orleans trumpet player. Man, that's my boy, man. We've learned so much music together. Like, you know, it was a great experience when we were living together, because our house was like the musician spot. So everybody used to come through and play. We had piano, we had drums. So cats would just pop in at any time, bring their new songs, be like, yo, I want to hear this. You know, let me play. So it was great. But I remember Kevin mentioning you to me, you know. I guess it was right before you came to New York. You know, he said, look out for my man. And it made me kind of think about like how when I first came to New York, and like cats were like, hey, look out for Dion, you know, and just kind of make sure he's on the up and up and kind of finding his way. And I think as Black trombonists, we kind of need that, you know. We need to know that somebody is looking out for us, you know, somebody that's been through similar experiences as us, you know, and have made it, you know, can kind of guide us through that. Did you feel like once you got to Julliard, being a young African-American trombonist from New Orleans, did you feel like there were other people that you could relate to peer-wise and like your teacher, professor-wise?
Good question. Like when I got to New York,
because you know your city is unique, and it's very social, and it's very and New York, even though it has a ton of people, it's sometimes not the most social place, you know, even though there's a ton of people, but it's a different way that you get to know people, you know. So I know you can kind of feel like, okay, what is all of this going on? Eventually you fall into your groove. But when you first got there, did you feel like, man, I'm a little fish out the water a little bit, you know, and I'll find my way? Or were there people like right away you were like, all right, I can relate to this person?
Yeah, I think that, you're right. New Orleans is so different in that way, because growing up there were definitely people that were looking out, just as a person and as a musician. And I guess when I got to New York, I was, that Winton was always supportive. He was always like, you can always call me, text me if you need me. You know, he was always very supportive. I would always go to his crib, especially like earlier in my Julliard career. I would always just hang out and go chop it up with him. So he was definitely somebody who I could always just call on if I needed some support and just somebody to talk to. And then I feel like I felt a little bit awkward just around, I guess in my peer group, just because everybody sort of knew each other from I guess different programs. I wasn't really in like all the jazz programs like that. But also they were, I guess, around each other more, and they I guess had more in common. And I was from New Orleans. Nobody else was from New Orleans, so I felt a little just very different in that way. So I guess I couldn't really relate as much. I guess when I got to Julliard, the only Black jazz trombone players were me and Coleman Hughes. And he ended up leaving. But it was, I guess by that point I had sort of found my way and, moved
Sure.
in my own way. But when I got there, it was a little challenging.
Yeah.
Were
you by the end of the program still the only African American trombonist in the section, or did some other players come in?
I was, by the end of my undergrad, there was in the program. No, there's Rashawn Salam, who's a great trombone player from Florida. He's great, and Jocelyn Perales. I believe he's half black, half Mexican, I believe. Okay. So he's great too. So wasn't alone by the end. By the end of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's interesting. Like I think about like some of the situations that I've been in where I've been like the only black trombonist or like one of the only black people in the band, like period, and sometimes, there's this like underlying thing that we have, when we walk in a situation like that, and just knowing what it is, like we know we have to perform at a certain level. We know we can't make the same mistakes as other people. We know just like we have to move and navigate this way a little bit different than other people may have. So I was wondering how it was like at Julliard. I mean, I guess as it morphed and you had other people like you, it was maybe a little easier to navigate, but maybe have you had any situations, whether in school or even on the professional scene, that you've walked into and you're the only or one of the few black musicians there? And if so, like, how did that make you feel?
I think that I definitely, when I first got there are instances where I just stood out. I mean, it was mostly at Julliard. It was mostly with donors and just navigating that whole thing, because they would for some reason always ask me to pull up at donor events, and a lot of the time I would be the only black face there, and it was kind of awkward. I mean, some donors are a little could be a little insensitive and say some kind of sus things, but it was for the most part it was cool. It was just a little awkward, just trying to I guess in a way code switch and just try not to say the quote unquote wrong thing, but at the same time, stay true to my heritage. Yeah. And being from New Orleans and being a black man, not wanting to, abandon that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've felt that in most of my time at the beginning of Julliard, for sure. Like I felt like I almost lost myself in that. Just trying to, seeing where everybody else came from and how they were comfortable with each other and came from a different place than me, and also were most of them were not black, so they couldn't really understand. Yeah. So I definitely almost lost myself, and then kind of had to snap myself out of it and just, realize that I'm from a special place and, come from a special people. So it's like, kind of not taking that for granted. And also in the scene too, I mean, there are definitely experiences where, well, actually there have been a few experiences where I was the only black player, but I also tried to, since those have happened, I try to make sure that I'm not the only black face in a room, just to I don't know, it just makes me, I guess, more comfortable, and also I just I don't know, it just makes the music feel different also, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. I remember the first time I played with an all black band. I think it was college. It was the first time I played with an all black group, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, it just feels different. There's all these underlying things that we don't have to say, that we can just have our oral tradition and like the things that are already in us, and it's just there, you know. And it's a comforting feeling, you know, when we look like historically, especially now when we have like YouTube and stuff like that, we can go back and see what the bands look like, as opposed to just hearing, you know. Now we can see it, and we see how deeply connected we were, you know, and kind of like a lot of the issues that were happening at that time, we're kind of dealing with those issues still, you know, in our own modern times. And I think the scene has definitely become more conscious of that, you know, with cats like Nicholas Payton, who have, you know, coined the Black American music. I mean, and just relating this music to the culture and the people that it comes from is just so important. And I understand totally how you say you can get caught up in everything, especially in New York. Like, there's so many good players in New York, you know, and you want to feel respected by your peers. I know, just being a trombonist, like, there weren't as many trombonists when I first came to New York. Like, they were there, but not in school. So like, when I go to jam sessions, I was one of the only ones. So it would be like, oh, the trombone player, you know. So you're already like at the bottom of the totem pole in cats' mind. So there was always like a thing of like, you know, they're making jokes about, oh, you're just a trombone player, you know, kind of thing. So that always fired me up to be like, well, I'm going to be the working trombone player. That's what you're going to know me at, you know. But that thing is always kind of there, you know, for us, just being trombone players. Then being a Black trombonist, it's like another layer almost, you know, where it's like, yeah, you can solo on the blues type of thing. It's like, okay, what about the other tunes? You know, I can solo on those too. You know, all of those, all those stigmas still play. They still play out. So that's part of why I wanted to have these conversations, because I don't think people really, not if they don't know, maybe they don't think it's still an issue, you know, or maybe that it's just, but I think at this current time that we're in, it's definitely, the discussion is more open, you know, and I've found people asking more questions about that kind of stuff.
I was going to say that it's funny that, you know, when you brought up Nicholas Payton, I was thinking about back to high school when, you know, that's when I first learned about, you know, about the band movement and everything. And it was just so funny how a lot of my peers in high school, not necessarily at my high school, but around my age, where I would communicate like on social media and everything, a lot of people were sort of bashing him and you know, denying the movement and just, you know, this guy's crazy. Like, what is he talking about? And, you know, now it's, you know, he's been right all along, you know what I mean? And it's kind of funny how the coin has kind of shifted where back then, or at least in my group, or I guess in my experience, a lot of my peers were the people who were proud to support the movement, the band movement, were sort of like not ostracized, but definitely made fun of, and just like, you know, there was a lot of conflict and pushback about it. And now it's sort of the other way around, where if you don't agree with it, it's kind of like, where are you? What are you talking about? Like, why are you even playing this music if you don't see what we're trying to say? You know, so it's kind of funny how at first the band supporters had to kind of live under a rock. There were some who didn't care; they were just vocal about it anyway. But like Nick, of course, and now it's the other way around, with the people who have things to say about it kind of are like living under a rock and kind of have to bite their tongue when it comes to, you know.
That's true, man. And it's funny how like just everything is kind of shifting a little bit. And I think unfortunately it's because things got so bad and so messed up, as if it wasn't before.
Right.
But I think now with social media, we see it more, before we heard more stories and like we knew it happened. Maybe we knew somebody or knew somebody that knew somebody, but now we all see it, millions of us see it. And I look at it two ways, it's traumatizing. It's traumatizing to see your people constantly put in this position for various different reasons. A lot of them, no reason at all. Yeah. So in that sense, it's like you don't want to consume too much of it. At the same time, you have to consume it in order to be able to truly want to make that change, and to truly want to be able to stand and keep that identity that you're talking about.
Yes.
And I think with all of this going on, a lot of people are finding the identity that, maybe they never expressed before, but now they feel more comfortable expressing that identity that is them. They just didn't feel comfortable in certain social settings, to really be themselves. So like, speaking of that, social media is kind of the way we communicate now, in the last, I would say 8 to 10 years, it's really drastically changed. Getting in the quote unquote door now is a little bit different than it was before. Before, like, you literally couldn't physically go in the door. Now people get a chance to see you professionally before they actually meet you. So it's kind of a way that you can get in the door so people can see what it is you really do. Do you feel as African-American trombonist that you've been able to use that to your advantage? Like, have there been jobs that you've been able to get because maybe somebody saw you on social media and then that translated to something, something that might not have happened if you were just the trombonist walking up the street,
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely get a lot of referrals from people just seeing my Instagram or my YouTube or my Facebook or anything like that. Seeing, that I have somewhat of a following and post a lot of content pretty regularly, demonstrating things that I enjoy doing or like to do or good at doing, whatever you want to call it. And I definitely get a fair amount of offers from social media alone. It just helps, I guess. It just puts it kind of eliminates the guesswork, I guess, in people taking risks to, I guess, hire talent or whatever you want to call it. But it's funny because it's at the same time, it's a lot of this social media game is perception. It's like what you allow people to see. So it can kind of work. It can kind of work against you in a few ways where, say you can do a lot more than what you have a lot more tools in your toolbox than just the brand that you portray on Instagram, right? Like you portray yourself as a if you portray yourself as for example, as a classical musician or something like that, but you can play, you can play BAM just as well. You know what I mean? You can sing R&B. You can do a bunch of other things that your quote unquote Instagram or social media brand doesn't necessarily allude to. So it's like, unless you have content ready to go to push out for that, to support those different talents that you may have, there's kind of no reason for anyone to take you as seriously on that side as they do for the brand that you portray, that you already have a fan base for. So it can kind of hurt in that way, but it's what you make it. But I've definitely gotten some cool offers from social media. It's kind of like we can get recommended, on a person to person basis, and then they go to social media to see what you're about and just sort of vet you and see if you're legit or whatever.
Yeah. Do you feel like your brand is being represented? I love that you said brand, because I think a lot of times as musicians, we don't understand that we are our brand. We're like Definitely. The Pepsi, the Nike, the whatever. And however you present your brand all of the time, is how people are going to perceive you. I know that like branding, like a lot of what people will I look at it as like reputation, like there wasn't so much, there wasn't really any social media when I first came to New York. So it was your reputation. It was like, right. I know this cat will be there on time. I know he can read. I know he can solo. I know, now it's everything that you said based off of kind of what you present. So do you feel like you have presented your brand in a way that people see the true depth of what you're about?
Not entirely yet. I think there's still another notch or two that I want to go deeper on with my branding, but that's something that I definitely want to take my time on and do the right way for me. So there's some stuff that I'm sort of working on with my manager, who's kind of doubling as my creative director too. We're just talking a lot in terms of what kind of content we want to put out and the music that we're also working on to release soon too. So it's it's one of those things where it's not quite. I think I'm fine with how it's going now, because people are, there are people who are receptive to it and love what's out right now and everything like that. So I'm kind of I'm excited for sort of like the cooking up stage where I'm, putting some other stuff together to see what people think about that. But I'm more or less happy with how things are now.
Yeah.
People are pretty supportive.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's great. You have a great following, and you're always putting good stuff together, man. I like the fact that you show people that you come from that tradition of New Orleans musician. Like you sing as well as you play. Like I don't think a lot of people understand like how much that adds to music. I'm fortunate to play with Harry Connick's band and Lucian Barber, and rest in peace, Lou.
Rest in peace.
He was just a master at, man, he could play something and then he'd sing it and then it's just like, and then play again. It's like, man, it's magic, and it's a tradition that isn't really, especially in New York, most horn players do not sing, and are actually kind of shy and scared about singing, so it's kind of tough to sing through your instrument if you don't sing, and it's just like a stigma that horn players have that fortunately you don't have. I really like seeing that kind of stuff on your page, man. It shows a lot of your knowledge of where you're coming from, it lets me know a lot that where you're going, definitely going good places, man. I appreciate that, So speaking of that, when, as you're going forward and you're writing new music and you got different projects coming out, do you feel that all of the different social injustice issues that we're currently facing will play a role in how you go about your next project, how you write music, how you present the music, the different people that you work with? Just kind of talk a little bit about how like all of the stuff that is going on is affecting you and your music.
So great question. I am sort of balancing that, because in some instances when I'm, making music, or like recording in my bedroom, things like that. Sometimes the music can sort of be an escape from what's happening. So it's not necessarily, the subject matter isn't necessarily about what's happening, just because it's sort of like a therapeutic escape from all the, the trauma and the turmoil that's happening right now. So that's on one side, it is that. And then on the other side, I do feel a responsibility to document how I feel about what's happening, because I feel like a lot of, as musicians, we're culture bearers, and we sort of have to document, what's happening in history. So I definitely feel a responsibility to do that. So it's kind of half and half for me. Yeah, I mean, it's some of the music is about, some of the music that I'm sitting on, it wasn't even made. Like, for example, before, some of the music that I'm sitting on was made before the pandemic and before everything really started ramping up. But some of the music that I'm sitting on right now is definitely about that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of half and half for me.
Yeah. I think it's like, for us as musicians, we're lucky because we have an outlet.
Yep.
We can sit down and we can use, like, the first therapy was music. The first medicine was music. And
Amen.
Where would we be without having that medicine throughout our lives? I look at all this, like, stuff that's been going on with the pandemic, and, like, we can't get out to play music live, but everything now that it's on, like, there's music on everything, and I think, just like, what if that music wasn't there? How like sad would all of this stuff be?
It would be so quiet and awkward and sad. Yeah.
It's strange. So it's kind of like, I feel I listen to a lot of, like, the protest music from, some of the Art Blakeys, the Gary Barts, and you hear some of these things that we try to emulate, some of these feelings we try to emulate, but we just can't get it. Like, but you understand the social settings that they were in. Now we're in that, for us. I feel like it's our time. Whenever this whole thing opens up, I think there's going to be some amazing music, that comes out of this period, because there's just a lot of there's a lot inside of us, and I think we're going to be leading the forefront of just kind of healing everything that's going on,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. So let me ask you one more question before I let you go. What advice, you're 24, you're kind of like right in the middle of, being the vet, and from, being in school, you're like about to enter that next phase from leaving college to your professional career. What advice would you have for somebody that's a little bit younger than you, that maybe sees what you're doing, but doesn't get to see all of what goes into what it takes for you to get there? What advice would you give to them for their own career, so they could, kind of help build their own thing?
I would, the first thing that came to mind was sort of documenting your progress. Just because I feel like it's kind of hard to see how you progress unless you've recorded it. I feel like it's, unless you can go back and listen to, like, wow, I made that musical decision. Like, wow, I decided to go there. Wow, my tone has really grown since then. Or, I feel like it's really important to sort of be in tune with how you're improving and notice that, and just be aware. And at the same time, while you're in the shed, not being afraid to reach out to people that you want to play with and connect with, because everybody knows that music is a process, and especially if you want to make a career out of it. And I don't know, it's like being aware of working on yourself, needing to work on yourself as a musician, and also not being afraid to just as a person, reach out to people that you want to play with and genuinely connect to them. Because I feel like that makes all the difference. Because while you're working on yourself, and getting better, you know what I mean? You'll have these connections and these relationships that you can actually, just since they're based in humanity and just person to person interaction, that it doesn't necessarily have to be about music. And so if you ever quote unquote needed to be about music, you can always be there. And I don't know if that really made any sense, but
it made, man, it made perfect sense, because, you know, it's great for me to hear something like this from you, because you've made the connection. You know, it's not just about, hey, hang out with this person because they can get you a gig.
Right.
You know, that's the last part of it. You know, the first part is the humanity that you talked about. And everybody knows, especially as African-American musicians, we are here like to help each other. Genuinely, I've never had any malice from anybody. That's like nobody. Everybody that knows that you're serious has been like, okay, I'm going to help you out. You know, my first teacher was Benny Powell, and he was always, his great saying was, man, I'm trying to teach you how to not drive a taxi for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Now, no offense to taxi or Uber drivers out there. You do your thing. No offense at all.
Also.
You know, but we as musicians, this is what we're born to do, you know, and I think having that connection with a mentor is so important. Also, what you said about finding yourself, you know, and finding things the earlier that you can do that, the better off you'll be. Because it's very easy to be a clone these days. There's so much technique, there's so much information out there that it's super easy for everybody to gather all this information and then regurgitate the same thing. But the only thing that's going to make you is you. You know, and you got to work on you, and you always have to be refining you so that you can put that presentation of yourself out there. That definitely is what will make you stand out, as well as the mastery of your art, you know. So I really think you're on that path, man. I really do.
Thank you so much.
And I appreciate you taking your time and, you know, sharing some of your knowledge with us on this episode of the Black Trombone Chronicles, man.
It's an honor, bro. Thank you so much, Dion.
Man, the honor is all mine, man. And so I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode. And I'll see you next time with some more amazing musicians. Jeffrey, thank you, man. Keep doing your thing. And I hope to see you. I hope to see and play with you soon. You know,
bro,
when this whole thing is over,
bro. Yes.
All right, man. Stay safe, and thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
I got you, bro. Thank you.
All right. Be well, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
Later.
I want to send a big thank you to Jeffrey for sharing his time and experiences with us. If you want to learn more about him, click the links in the description. And if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time at the Chop Shop.